Likewise, if you come into Hirschberger Financial Group, my staff doesn't have t-shirts that says, I'm a Christian investment insurance business. You know, I don't do that, all right? But I think and hope you will find, as you sit down at our table and counsel with us, that you're going to find that we're applying these things in the fashion that I live, you know, and you'll see this is how I go about. Now, most folks won't know it came because of a prudent man from Proverbs, you know. Don't say that. Or I might just say a prudent man would do this, but you're going to see that that's how these things get applied, all right? Maybe I would say, and if in case, Chuck, this is a little bit of your question, long-term care is dealt on a daily amount provision, all right? So if your parents or somebody, or grandparents or somebody's talking about this thing, so you have an idea of what it comes to be with. If in fact it costs $250 to be cared for in a but in a cared for facility, you need to be fed, cared for, you know, bathed. If in fact that's the cost, my strategy would be that you ought to insure for what you can't provide on your own. That would be how I would approach. Now, what comes into play with this? If it's going to cost $5,000 to care for you in a facility like that, or at home, but $5,000, and your regular pension and your Social Security is continuing for $3,000 a month, then insure for $2,000. You don't need to try and buy $250 because all those things are going to keep coming in. That would be, again, the principles. Who are you dealing with? You're not going to get a sales pitch from me because I want the premium for the, you know, I'm going to apply what I think is wise, you know. So again, some of that will come into play. Maybe I don't handle the companies you like, but if you like the principles that I deal with, I think that's an important factor. All right. Any other questions? Chuck, did I get? Yeah. I mean, with the. All right. Yes, Ryan.
I had a long time burning, deep question to ask you. Is the Geico Gecko from England or Australia?
Yeah, you know, but I wanted the same thing when I listened to that, you know. But no. That's good, thanks. Anything else? Yes.
For long-term care,
yes.
I'm in the nursing field,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that nursing and healthcare is catastrophical.
Mm-hmm.
And does like long-term care cover in-home care? Does it only cover when you're in a facility?
Okay. That is a good question. The question is, does long-term care only cover when you're in a facility? Sometimes even as I have a conversation like this, I think that's how we clarify, you know, and make sure somebody understands. But check with your individual policy, all right? The companies, the major companies that I work with or offer do carry home care, all part of the premium, all right? So you can probably find a policy, again, with a little less cost somewhere, because maybe that's what you figure. You need lesser cost, all right? It's not there's a right and wrong for all these companies sometimes, all right? It's getting you to the right product, the right company offering for your need. But no, there are companies that will offer care at home, all right? Just be sure that you don't make an assumption, all right? And when you purchase a product, that ought to be a question you ask of that representative. Exactly. That's right, because some companies are written specifically to only be dealt with in a facility. And if you don't think then know that.
I know with the agency I work for, we have 24 accounts. It's actually more than if you go into a facility. You have to weigh, you know, like I know facilities can be about $5,000 or more, not much less, a month, just for basic care. That cannot always cover the medical part. That's just basic lodging.
That's right. That's right. And if that's the case, again, you will need to put together what you can afford. And I tell clients, sometimes they're so afraid that they'll run out of assets or whatever. You can only put the kind of wrap around protection that you're able to provide for, all right? And you don't, beyond that, that's your capabilities, you know? So you can't just think that you have to suddenly become a pauper so that you can protect all your assets that they're going to pass on to your children. You can do what you can do, all right, and get a product that works accordingly and is affordable. All right? Question?
Disability wasn't something that you touched on.
Okay.
What's your take on that?
Disability, again, would be you are far more likely to be disabled than you are to run risk of passing on in life. Disability, good. That is another area that I would recommend. Quite often, if in fact you are employed with an employer that has any kind of group benefits, check and make sure you can purchase it there, because that's right. Oftentimes that is quite good, inexpensive usually. Now the drawback to that, and it's part of planning, and maybe we're in a culture now where, unlike there was a time years ago when my parents started, you got a job with locally here, you got a job with Armstrong, you're there for life, you know, or you got a job for Hershey Foods and you're there for life. But we're in a different environment now. You're here with this company as long as you're helping the bottom line and we keep running, because if suddenly we can do it cheaper somewhere else, it's just not that difficult. We can just pick up and get rid of this company and build it over here. And so we're in a different environment. If in fact you never carry any individual disability coverage, and your company just leaves, and now you have a condition, it's gone. All right? So just understand the risks that are applied when you use company benefits, because the company no longer there, the benefit is gone. All right? So again, lay out what you and your spouse feel is necessary. What are the dollars that are available that you can provide for these things? Oftentimes company benefits apply. I use some company benefits. So they're not bad, but just be aware as circumstances change and perhaps there's a little more flexibility within a budget, there's prudence to beginning to carve some of those benefits out and not rely fully on a company benefit, so that you have something that can stay with you. Would be advice I would give.
When younger people are planning their insurance needs, and how should they look at Social Security survivor benefits? How does that factor into it?
Well, generally, few people come in and say they're not willing to consider them. All right. I think as we start our conversation, most likely say, well, there's never going to be any benefits from it. They start until we see the cost of just how much that is. All right. So generally, I will counsel folks and apply as if Social Security will pay. Social Security will pay up to essentially your children are on their own. Changes at 16 and then at 18 finally goes away. But essentially, it will provide a benefit that would help, you know. Those benefits are about maybe $1,500, $2,000, you know, a month if you have more than one child. So they're not, I mean, that's a good benefit, but it's nothing that's going to, again, it's not an excuse not to care and provide for your family and get some insurance, all right, because it's a meager amount. But likewise, I think that's what it should be. I think we do have the responsibility to provide on our own. I don't want this socialist, I'm going along. So, but nevertheless, what else? Yes?
I did the Truth Project with a group, and it talks about how we rely on the government for everything, like Social Security. And one of the questions was, what happened to the church? Why doesn't the church come up to the plate when all these bad things happen?
That's right.
Which is an interesting phenomenon in our society.
Yep. That's exactly right. I don't know what happened first. I imagine it was, as a church, culture was getting away from being a Christian culture, and so we allow the government to step in. But now it's such that, well, the government's going to do that, so I guess we won't, you know, and it's not right. But that's a good point. I think, in theory, we could get rid of all these government programs because the churches should just pick our part up. But I guess the big challenge is, do we? You know, it's interesting, and I think Tracy would agree with this. Those of you who were at the evening program last, when the I guess, the meeting of the church. But it's interesting to know you are a part of a church. It talks about with benevolence, outreach, that we haven't been able to find another church that we can compare ourselves to, just kind of like what that program does. All right. So now we don't say that in the sense Calvary's got it all together. We're the magnet. We're the one that provides for everything. But it is interesting what this church has felt the need to do, and apparently the congregation must agree with it, but the provisions are there. We don't budget into the church budget benevolence, all right? It's what's given, all right? So you are a part of a congregation that must apply that principle and ask that question of themselves. Why aren't we doing that? And are doing it far greater magnitude than any other mega church that we find, proportional, that does that. So we must wrestle with that question. Jared? Yep. Thanks for having me. If you have any questions, I'll be back for tithes.